The Real Weather Watch is brought to you by DeKalb, unstoppable yield momentum. We're joined now on RealAgriculture.com by Drew Lerner. He's the owner of World Weather Incorporated and based in Kansas City. Welcome today, Drew.
Well, thank you very much.
Drew, Western Canada, we're really fighting some crazy variable weather. Last week, it's freezing cold across the prairies. This week, it's warmer and incredibly windy in some areas. What's going on?
Well, we are transitioning or trying to transition a little bit from one pattern to another at the moment. We had months of very pleasant weather across the prairies, and I think we probably in the back of our minds knew full well that we were going to have to deal with something to make up for all the tranquility that we saw. September, October, most of this month have really been very quiet, unusually quiet weather periods, and warmer than normal for the most part, with the exception of that extreme cold that occurred last week. That was something that was a bit of a shock after all the warm conditions. We are dealing with a number of weather patterns right now that are playing out across the prairies, and they're fighting each other is what's going on. We have La Nina doing battle against a couple of weather patterns that are connected with ocean temperatures in the eastern part of the Pacific. It's called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. We're in the negative phase of that. We're also in the positive phase of Arctic Oscillation. That's keeping the warmth around across a fair amount of the prairies. And Arctic Oscillation will probably back off and start turning more negative in the second half of winter. So we'll probably see some more of the seesawing on temperatures for the next few weeks, but progressively turning more and more cold on a consistent basis as we move forward in time. So January and February will definitely be colder than normal across the eastern three-fourths of the prairies, with only western Alberta probably being left out of that situation.
So with it being rather cold, what are you expecting in terms of snow accumulation?
Most La Nina events tend to have above average snowfall across portions of the western and southern parts of the prairies. This particular La Nina is going to be weaker than last year's. We will for sure not see nearly as much snow as we did last year, but we'll still see enough that will be above average in a fair amount of Alberta and in southern parts of Saskatchewan. I think northern Saskatchewan crop country and Manitoba both will have lighter than usual snow depths, and snow frequencies will be a little bit below average, and even the moisture content may be a little low in those areas. As far as moisture content in the snow for Alberta and southern Saskatchewan, it'll probably be a little bit above average. So kind of a mixed bag across the region. I guess probably the bottom line is that we'll see the greatest amounts of snow in the west and south, and the greatest coolness occurring in the eastern three-fourths of the region.
So is there some sort of rule where if we have less snow accumulation in the wintertime, does that mean anything in terms of moisture for the spring?
Well, it doesn't. If you're talking about from a precipitation potential in the spring, no, not really. But it says a lot about our moisture situation when we're going into spring. Obviously, the more snow we have on the ground, the more we're going to have runoff and a lot of surplus moisture around in the early weeks of spring, so planting could end up being delayed. But you can't really correlate the two because the whole reason for the above average snowfall in the autumn is due to one type of weather pattern, and when you get into spring, you're quite often being influenced by other weather patterns. So it ends up being more by coincidence that we end up seeing patterns where you might have, a wet spring after you've had a bunch of snow over the winter. But I think most of that is coincidental, and there really isn't any well-defined correlation that I can tell you about right now.
For some parts of Western Canada, we get some Chinooks, and we're experiencing one the last couple of days in southern Alberta. What about, does this season lend itself to more Chinooks than last year?
I think that we can get those to occur any time that we have wide swinging temperatures occurring across, and I guess that sounds a little silly, but what I'm trying to say is that when we get these big surges of cold air that come out of Northwest Territories and the Yukon and Alaska, they are often followed by quick warm-ups when you're in a pattern where we're not locking into that cold weather bias. And anytime you get into that situation, which is what we're in right now, that cold surge that came in last week was a very potent, very large cold air mass, but it was not sustainable. And so once it passed through, we were looking at returning to a warmer weather biased pattern. And anytime you've got that kind of a scenario playing out, with the return of the warmth is often so significant that it comes with a favorable west wind, and we end up with the Chinooks occurring across the Rocky Mountain region in the south part of Alberta. And I think we can see some of that is still continuing for a little while until we get to the point where we're more consistently into the cold air, and then you'll see that disappearing until we get to the spring.
Drew, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a good day.